Hi,
Hello.
Tehran. Can you
Hi,
hear?
Kusha. How are you? I
I'm doing
can.
very well. Can you hear me? Oh, good. I'm so glad. Thank you so much for being here with me. I'm so
Thank you so
excited.
much. I'm glad you consider me an expert. That's so nice of you.
I never said you're an expert, did I?
Well, you should have. I'm an expert.
You're,
I'm a
you're,
black and Iranian person named Tehran. I'm an expert on racism.
I think I know this for sure. You know a whole lot more than I do, and I'm not in a place to come out and say a bunch of stuff because it's just not my. I just don't feel right about it. I
I
feel like I'm a
understand.
privileged. I feel like I'm a privileged sort of white person, and I don't mean to use the quotation in a sarcastic way, but what I'm saying is a lot of us Persians like to associate
Sure.
ourselves. So I just think that it's just not my place to come out and say, oh, should people protest? Should they not protest? It's just not my place to say. But there are a few questions that have come up that I thought you'd be a great person to answer.
We talk about racism systematically in all places. In America, it happens to be black. In other places, it happens to be other groups of minorities. And that's what a lot of people don't understand what Black Lives Matter means. Black Lives Matter does not mean Black lives only matter. Black Lives Matter does not mean Black Lives Matter more. Black Lives Matter means Black lives also matter. Also, meaning we know that all lives matter. All lives are very important. But unfortunately, in the United States, systematically, there are times where Black lives do not seem to matter at all. And we must correct this. I don't think people understand what the point of all of this is. This is not just racism. People are not trying to end racism or protest racism within the individual. That's something that unfortunately is a decision amongst every single person. What we're trying to do is end systematic racism. Systematic racism, which means laws, rules, regulations, codes that encourage racist behavior, profiling, targeting, police brutality. That does not mean that police brutality does not happen to other people. Unfortunately, it does. However, when I say unfortunately it does not mean that I dismiss any other acts of police brutality. All acts of police brutality are wrong. When we target specifically black people, then we realize how much more wrong it is because it's targeted. So it happens much more to a community, and then it also happens to everyone else, which is all wrong. Someone told me the statistic that last year in 2019, 19 white people were shot by and killed by the police who were unarmed, and 9 black people, which means that it's only half amount of black people were shot by police. Why are we not more concerned about the white people who shot by police? We are concerned about the white people shot by police. We are also concerned by the fact that in America, 72% of the population is white and only 12% is black. If that statistic was 50% white people and 25% black, we would not condone, but we would understand that statistic.
The only bad experience I had with my photography was photographing this Iranian woman. I was talking to my assistant, just having an innocent conversation about lighting. And I turned around and I said, you know what? So-and-so person has dark features. So turn the light, so we can reflect her hair or whatever I said. She almost kicked me out of her home. I kid you not, because she was offended that I called her dark.
Yeah.
And she said that it's a trigger because people always tell her she looks Indian. So anyways, so I'm just saying.
Yasi in the chat brought important, and I say this as به ایرانی‌ها که در ایران در خود ایران هستند, the Iranians who are inside Iran, they will say, well, in Iran we don't have racism, and
yes,
I tell them, well, ask the Afghans there how they feel about that statement. It's a very unfortunate situation. We know that racism is everywhere. We know that racism is real. Sometimes racism is not systemic, but it is social, meaning that there are things such as skin lightening cream in places like India, so that the darker cast can become lighter. So we know these things exist. There's a bias against darker skin. Now, in the United States, how does this affect people? Because people show me things like crime statistics. They go, well, black people commit so much crime, which is actually not true. Not because black people don't commit crime. Unfortunately, black people do commit crime. It's that there's less black people than there are white people. So most of the crimes in the United States are actually committed by white people, especially when it comes to murder, especially when it comes to violent rape. It's a majority of white people. Now, that doesn't mean that white people are bad people. They are not. That's one of the most common misconceptions, is when people hear black power, they get afraid because they think that black power means white hate. That is not what black power means. They only think that because that is what white power means. Black power does not mean white hate. White power does mean black hate. So when you look at a crime statistic, understand that there's a series of cultural, socioeconomic, and historical precedences why crime exists in the first place. Secondly, also know that if two people, one black and one white, both walk into a store to shoplift, both are criminals, and security guard is paying attention and he only follows the black person, and who gets arrested? The black person. It doesn't mean that the white person did not commit a crime. It simply meant that the white person was not profiled or targeted for that crime. That is something we need to all pay attention to, profiling and targeting. Also, when these two people, let's say they both get caught and they're both arrested, now they go to the judicial system. Innocent until proven guilty, they're both found guilty. The difference is the black person is more likely to receive 5 times more punishment than the white person, meaning that now this black person is going to be institutionalized and part of the system. We have a lot of examples of this. On June in Florida of last year, 2 men go in front of a judge for robbery. 1 black, 1 white. Both of them with the exact same criminal record. The black man, and both of them, by the way, committing the exact similar crime on the exact similar day. The black man received 5 years in jail. The white man received probation. So now we get the statistic that there's another black man in jail. And now we get the statistic that there's a black child being raised without a father. Now we get the statistics, and we use these statistics to justify our systemic racism. We have laws such as the fact that felons cannot vote that were created specifically to deny black people the right to vote. This is not my opinion. I rarely give my opinion on a lot of subjects. I'm simply stating facts. So when people ask me if I've ever been a victim of racism, I simply say, hi, Kusha, you know I've been pulled over 23 times for drunk driving. Did you know this? No, probably not. You know what the problem with that is? I've never drank alcohol in my life. So why did I get pulled over for drunk driving? Was I actually swerving as I was told? Was I supposed to be subjected to a search? Did they have to run my record to realize that I'm not a threat? Why was I pulled over? I've never drank. I've never tried any drugs. I've never smoked. I've never even tried anything in my life. And yet I've been a victim. When I go to Persian events and Persians are so surprised by me because I'm half black, half Persian. Why do you think that is? If I was half white, half Persian, would they be as surprised?
No, definitely not.
No, they wouldn't.
Definitely a good point.
But the fact that I'm half black, half Persian, why is that surprising? Because Persians do not mix with black people. Do you know how I know? This is how racism starts. If your daughter brings home a white guy, it's okay. But if she brings home a black guy, she's a whore. Now we have a conversation. This isn't something that's only happened from my experience.
True. It's
something we've all heard.
Yes.
So that is where it starts. Did you hear that thought process? Now, if she brings home an Asian person, it's something maybe we joke about. If she brings home an Indian, people go, Indian. It's all levels. But look at the level that was the lowest. Look at the level that was the most severe. Who was it directed towards? Was it directed because people say things like, oh, you speak so white. What does that mean? I speak educated? I speak articulately? Because if I remember correctly, Malcolm X was white. right? No, no, no. He was black. Martin Luther King was white. No, 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 no. He was a black man. President Obama, also white, correct? Well, actually, he was half white. That's the part of racism. That everyone assumes President Obama is the first black president, when in truth, he's the first mixed president. He's half white, half black. But what do we see? We see black. Why? Because that is the first prejudice that we are aware of. Race is the easiest bias you can have, because I can look at someone and tell what color of skin they are. Then I can determine what religion they are, and then I can determine what sexual orientation they are, and it keeps going down the list. It keeps going down the list. And that's something we need to be aware of in ourselves. And that's why so many people feel attacked, is because accountability will feel like an attack when you're not ready to accept responsibility.
Absolutely. Now, given that the audience here is predominantly Persian, can you give us a few other examples of things that people say, you know, when they're unaware?
Listen, Persian people, I love Persian people. They're my people. I'm very proud of being Persian. Being proud and having pride are two different things.
Right.
I'm proud, but I'm not prideful. I don't think that being Persian is better than being anything else. I accept Persians are great, and I also think that other people are great. In Farsi, we have this wonderful term for Asian people. Do you know what it is? Oh yeah, it's Chesh Tang. Listen, now Chesh Tang, by the way, is the word. We've changed it recently to Asiai, right? Or maybe we'll say Chini, Japuni, but the concept is Chesh Tang. What does Chesh Tang mean? Can you translate that for all of us who don't?
Tight eyes.
Tight eyes. That is what we literally call. How is a group of people who call another group of people things like tight eyes or burnt skin, sore pus, not understanding the concept of racial connotation? How are we not understanding that? How can we not see it? Just because it doesn't affect you, but it does affect you. It does affect you. Because if you're my friend, you will care about this too. We really are in this together.
Tehran, can you please, I'm just kind of going from here.
Sure, tell me any questions you have.
But, you know,
please.
Again, I hear a lot about, you know, again, my friend was disagreeing. My husband was trying to explain to her for 45 minutes that there is white privilege. And she said, no,
sure.
I don't think there's white privilege. So can you talk a little bit about what your thoughts are on the matter?
Of course. I can understand why it's so difficult for white people to understand privilege. To the privileged, equality will always feel like oppression. White privilege is a very difficult thing to see if you have it. Let's understand this. You know, right now we don't have any NBA. I'm missing basketball so much, right? I understand as a person who's taller, you know, tall people in the NBA, tall is a privilege, meaning that if you're tall, you have a very good chance of making it to the NBA. That does not mean if you're tall, you will make it to the NBA. That is not the case. There are a lot of tall people that work at Walmart. I understand. However, if you are tall, you have a better chance than anyone else of making it to the NBA. We're all aware of this because the NBA is made up of tall people, correct? That does not, once again, it does not mean that you will make it to the NBA. It just means you have a better chance. It means that height is not one of the reasons you won't make it to the NBA.
Right.
Well, white privilege is very similar. White privilege does not mean that you will be successful. White privilege does not mean you will not experience hardship and you will not experience racism. White privilege does not mean that everything is perfect in your life and horrible in everyone else's. It simply means that the color of your skin is not the reason for those injustices and inequalities. That's what that means.
Exactly.
It means that your skin color is not the first thing that people subject you to. It can be of various other factors. It can be your socioeconomic status. It can be who you are as a person. It can be your religion. It can be your sexual orientation. It can be your gender. But it won't be because you're white by the color of your skin. In the United States, because the United States, once again, is made up of a vast majority of white people, we see this predominant in our media, in our movies. We see the representation. And so we are very aware of the white struggle. It's almost as if white is right and everything else is niche. It's specific. So everybody watches a love movie, a romance movie between a white man and a white woman. Everyone watches that. How many movies have you seen between a black man and a black woman as the main characters of the movie, and that is your love story?
I haven't.
Exactly. Because it's not the experience that you relate to. Have you ever seen a white man and a white woman fall in love? Yeah. Sleepless in Seattle, How to Lose a Man in 10 Days, all the time. The Notebook. So many people view The Notebook and see themselves, but look in the mirror and see me. That's privilege. When you don't have to think about race, that is privilege. When race is not the defining characteristic of who you are, that is privilege. I understand why it's so difficult for a lot of white people to understand it. It is something that does not affect them. I understand. However, that doesn't mean that it's something that does not affect our country. It does not mean it's something we should not be aware of.
I have this same friend arguing, they say, why do you, pull the race card? I came from Iran. My mom never talked about racism, never said that they were the victims of racism.
Sure.
We never looked at it that way, and we succeeded. And there are a lot of people that, play victim.
I understand.
And play the race card. And
to them, their racism is politicism. Ask them about the political card that happens to get pulled all the time when you speak to Iranians. Ask about how, because we often compare that struggle. A lot of Iranians have said to me recently, well, Tehran, my family came from Iran with nothing. Right. And we were able to make a strong community. We were able to become successful and wealthy. Why can't black people do the same thing? I understand. That's the argument. I understand, because it's very difficult for you to comprehend why it's difficult. You feel like you were able to do it. You faced struggle, you faced adversity, inequality, injustice, and you were able to uplift yourself. Well, point number one.
Hold on one second.
Yeah,
for the person commenting that I'm clueless, I'm not clueless. I'm bringing up questions that other people are, I'm bringing up the points that other people are expressing. These are not my questions. I'm just. No,
you know what? I'm gonna say this to this person, to Tehran, who I appreciate, always showing support. Kusha is clueless. Everyone is. But you know the difference is Kusha is willing to learn. Kusha is willing to learn and be educated. And that is more important. I'm glad she's clueless, because a lot of people who have a clue, quote unquote, are the same ones who are hating and disrespectful and racist. So I appreciate the fact that Kusha is asking me these questions and is speaking to me openly and honestly and trying to actually learn. Because that's one of the things. So many people have so many opinions on this matter, and so few people have actually read a single book on Black struggle. So few people have seen a single documentary on Black struggle. Everybody looks for their own confirmation bias. They read one article and one meme and they think they know everything. But the people who are actually experts, they don't believe. That's actually something that happened with the coronavirus. When people are like, well, how come it took us so long? Why was there no plan? There was a plan. The one thing that experts never calculated was that people who weren't experts would just not believe them. Listen is the first thing. I saw the pain of people in the Armenian genocide. I don't know if you're aware of the Armenian genocide. There's a march every single year in Los Angeles. And I saw people marching. And so you know what I did? I took the time to read, and I took the time to educate, and I took the time to listen. I listened to the people, and I listened to what they had to say. And I realized that they were in pain, and that there were groups of people who denied their pain. There were groups of people in countries like Turkey who were dismissive of their pain. And I read and I educated myself and I listened, and I saw how much that pain caused them. And even though in Turkey there are groups of people who were not affected by this, so they denied the pain, I realized that pain. I became aware of it. And even though there isn't much that I can do, awareness is the first step. So I thank you so much, Kusha, for wanting to be aware.
You're welcome. I do want to be aware. I know, I do want to be aware, and I think it's extremely irresponsible to just come and speak, you know, to kind of give talking points and to speak from, you know, an emotional point of view. And I just think it's really, really important to talk to people that have actually gone through it, you know, walked the walk, experienced everything. It's really important. So that's why I've kept quiet until this point. And one thing what was it that I wanted to ask you too? Okay, so for example, shoot.
How much racism I face when I go to the airport and my name's Tehran and I'm black and
Talk
Persian.
about that.
How much racism? How much racism I face when I go to Persian gatherings and people are like, Insia Hikie, who's this black guy? I experience all of this. How many times I've been pulled over by the police? How many times I've been accused of certain activities or behaviors simply because of the way I look with no basis? Yes, that's happened to me. Did I receive a phone call last year from a police officer who finally spoke up from my college? Because at my college, I used to get harassed all the time. I was very active. I was very academic. I was athletic. I did a lot of things. And because of this, I was targeted by the police. And she finally broke her silence and spoke up and contacted me with her attorney because they were bringing a class action lawsuit against their police, saying that they were directly ordered to target me because I was black and Iranian. That is a real thing. That is my life. That is the life that I've lived, and I've had to maintain and I've had to walk. So on top of all the pressures of life and love and dating and living and trying to be successful, I also had to worry about getting pulled over by police officers and making it home that day. You know, there's this video that I saw last year, which was one of the saddest videos I'd ever seen. There was a mom, she was white, and the father of her child was black. The father passed away in the service, in the military, when her child was young. So the mom raised her son with her family and did the best she could. He was shot and killed by police at the age of 19. And she says that his crime was her fault. She never raised him to know that he was black. She never had the conversation with him to tell him what to do when he gets pulled over by a police officer for the color of the skin. She didn't know better. He didn't know better. He was raised white. So when he was pulled over, he spoke to the officer like a white person who had felt like they had done nothing wrong. And for that action, he was shot.
But in George Floyd's case, I think what turned everything upside down is the fact that he did everything that he was supposed to do. You know, I was listening to a conversation with Van Jones, and that's what he explained. He said, you know, usually, you know, we tell people when you get pulled over, when you get arrested, you need to do these things as a black person. He did all those things, and still, this happened to him.
With George Floyd, I want to say to all the people who tell me, well, he had a criminal record. There is no perfect victim. There is no perfect victim. Right. You're right. George Floyd had a criminal record, which they didn't know at the time because they figured out who he was after the fact. And then they tried to cover it up with a false record of his autopsy on site. Never mind that. Breonna Taylor was 26 years old. She was asleep in her bed merely a week and a half before when police erroneously broke into her house, shot her, killed her, and arrested her husband. By the way, they had not announced themselves, who with a legal firearm shot back, not knowing who was in the house. This is a fact that happened. She died. She didn't have a criminal record. She was asleep in her own bed. By the way, the person they were looking for was already in custody when they made this false entrance into the house. Already in custody. That's part of the problem. Tamir Rice was 12 years old and was playing outside with a toy gun. The police were notified and they were told the person looks like a child and it's possibly a toy gun. The police officer who arrived on the scene, a 26-year-old officer, shot him within 5 seconds of arriving on the scene and stated he thought that not only was Tamir Rice a threat, that he was a 25-year-old suspect. Philando Castile was in the car with his significant other and their child. Police pulled them over for having a broken taillight. The police asked for Philando Castile's license, even though he was in the passenger seat. Philando Castile raised his hands, told the officer that he had a legally registered firearm. which, by the way, is part of our Second Amendment rights. It's the right that so many people fight for and protest and go to Capitol Hill. The same people who deny racism fight for gun rights, and yet none of them showed up for Philando Castile. He put his hands up, told the officer that he had his registration and his license. However, he also had a firearm in the car under his seat. He would not use it. He would not reach for it. He is unarmed at the time. And as he reached for his license, he was shot and killed. The police officer that shot and killed him was arrested, charged, but not convicted, as most of the police officers who were arrested are. They are not convicted.
Why is
They're
that?
not convicted. And it's because of systematic racism. It's because of systematic injustice. In fact, we see that, remember the 19 unarmed white males that were killed at the beginning of this conversation,
yes,
versus the 9 unarmed
yes,
black? Well, of the 9 unarmed black, none of those police were convicted. Of the 19 unarmed white, 8 were. That's the difference. That's systematic racism. That's the problem, where we dehumanize the people by calling them animals, by calling them thugs. And then we take inhumane acts upon them. That is part of the problem. Now, it's very easy to point out, well, black on black crime is a huge problem. Why don't black people care about black on black crime? Black people do care about black on black crime. Black on black crime is also, notice the word also, a problem. However, we are not expecting responsibility for a criminal. No one calls white on white crime, but it exists. Black on black crime is a term that exists in order to separate the problem. Crime is a problem. Now, what we know about black on black crime is that when black people do commit a crime, what we know for a fact is they get arrested, charged, and convicted, correct? That's why we say black people are criminals in the first place. Well, you know what? Police officers rarely get arrested, even more rarely get charged, and even more rarely get even close to being convicted. Oscar Grant was a 22-year-old who was accused of jumping the subway rail when it wasn't working. In front of his friends and his girlfriend, he was handcuffed, put on his stomach, and while he was placed on his stomach with his hands behind his back, he was shot in the back. That is why we protest. George Floyd is not a person. I don't know George Floyd. He didn't owe me $20. This isn't a guy that I hung out with. I don't know George Floyd. But I know George Floyd in my heart. George Floyd is my brother. George Floyd is my uncles. George Floyd is my cousin. George Floyd is me. George Floyd is all of you, because that's what happens when people don't realize. Systematic racism affects a group of people until they're no longer there, and then it will affect you next. Except there won't be us to speak up for you anymore. That's the problem. This is where it starts. George Floyd is all of us. George Floyd is an idea, a concept that's much bigger than racism. George Floyd is inequality. George Floyd is injustice. George Floyd is systematic oppression and disenfranchisement. That's who George Floyd is. And so we have to understand when people say, but I was able to come to this country and be successful, I respect that. I respect and admire every single Iranian, every single immigrant that has come to this country and become a successful, amazing member, productive member of society. I also ask them, because they'll tell me, we came here with no money. My own father came here with no money. But you know what my father came here for? He came here to go to engineering school, which means he was educated. He came from a good family background. So yes, when he came to America, he had no money, but he had money in Iran. He had education in Iran. They were educated. Education is key. Education is key. So while we spend $100 billion on military and less than $1 billion on education, let's start with that also being part of the problem. Education is key. Having knowledge is something that no one can take away from you. So a lot of immigrants came to this country poor, but very educated. Never mind the people that came here with money. A lot came here poor, but very educated. And therefore, they taught that value and pride in education to their own children. And those children grew up and became doctors, lawyers, engineers, dentists. If they're not so smart, chiropractors, whatever. They became successful. So when it's not enough to just walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, you have to walk that mile in their shoes with their legs and their knowledge of how to walk. That is when you learn how far you were able to go.
Tehran, what do you say to the people that are sort of mixing, objecting, oh, COVID-19 was such an issue until yesterday. Now, everybody's the same people that said stay inside, don't go out, quarantine, now are encouraging people to go out there and protest. I'm sure you've heard this.
Yes.
So what do you say about that?
COVID-19, it's so funny to me how many people went from helicopter pilot experts to epidemiologists to civil rights leaders within 3 months. It's so interesting to me. Someone's an expert on something new. Someone's an expert on something new. The concept is COVID-19 is very real. It's very much a problem. It's unfortunate that it's coinciding with the protests. Now, a lot of people think politicians are encouraging protests. Politicians are encouraging their votes. That's a problem that we see in the United States. We see that Republicans and Democrats, Republicans and Democrats. I hate when everyone points fingers as if we're right wing, left wing, same bird, everybody, same bird. In fact, we should be way more upset that in America, when it comes to the president of the United States, we only get 2 choices. But when it comes to Miss America, there's 52 choices. We should be more upset that we have more crayon colors in a box than we have presidential candidates. So if you don't like red, there's blue. If you don't like blue, there's red. I never speak about politics. Politics is divisive. And honestly, politics is opinion-based. I do not talk about politics. I don't care who you voted for. If you don't like it, don't boo, vote. A lot of people are booing, and yet not a lot of people voted. A lot of people complain, and 100% of people complain, and yet less than 50% of eligible voters voted in a country that fought and died for the right to vote. And there are countries in this world that do not have nearly half the rights that we have, yet people do not vote. Don't boo, vote. If you don't like it, don't speak it. And when people talk about President Trump or President Obama, I understand their political opinions. When it comes to President Trump, I always say President Trump is not the problem. President Trump is a symptom. When you don't like President Trump, you're simply saying you don't like half or more of this country. That's really what you're saying. You don't like at least half, at least half, right, of this country. You don't know them. You don't recognize what they're saying. That's really how that works. Same thing with President Obama. I don't talk politics, but I do talk about principles. And one of the principles I talk about is the fact that Republicans and Democrats, I wish Republicans and Democrats wanted to help America as much as they wanted to help their political parties. Yes. I wish that was the case. I wish they thought about what's good for the United States more than what they thought was good for blue or red. I wish that was the case. But what we see is politicians simply want votes. That's what they come down to. They get big donations from big corporations, and then we have oil spills in the Arctic because they simply need money for votes. They spend $1 billion on a candidacy when that money could go anywhere else and do so much more good because they want votes. Well, when it comes to politicians, I understand. And I understand, I don't condone their actions. Because in many cases, a rational person, a sane person can understand, but a rational person does not condone. And there's a difference, right? So I understand what they're doing, but I do not condone it. It's unfortunate that we need these protests right now. Because once again, George Floyd is not just this guy. George Floyd is a symbol. It's something that means something. It's someone that united all 50 states, 18 different countries, the largest civil rights movement in the history of man happened over this past week. And here's the thing. I hope all of you know where you were. Because in 30 years, everyone's going to lie and say they were on the right side of history. Everyone is going to lie. How do we know that? Because we've seen it before. If you go to Nazi Germany and ask in Germany today, how many people's families were part of the Nazi party? Everyone denies it. No, no, no. They were wrong. They were horrible. But that wasn't the case. When you look at Martin Luther King and all the police officers that were hosing them down and the dogs that were attacking them and the white people who were refusing to let black little kids and black little girls into their classrooms in 1954, none of those people exist today. Everyone was on the right side of history. Well, 30 years from now, everyone's going to say that they were on the right side of history, that they protested and they agreed. Except the difference is, I see you. You have posts. You have social media. They didn't have posts and social media for us to prove it, but there will be now in the future. So we'll know which side of history you were on. We'll know that you were against the side of equality, that you were stubborn against injustice, that you felt that comfort meant more to you than liberty. We'll remember that forever because you wrote it down. We'll know that you never put your money where your mouth was.
So for people that say, you know, I'm not a racist. I believe in peaceful protests, but this is getting out of hand. There's a lot of looting going on. Black communities are getting destroyed, and I'm against this. And this, I'm not quite sure what their point is, but this is what these are thugs in the streets and so on. So what do you say to that?
I tell them, read a book. I literally tell them, read a book. It's very simple. Just read one book. We're not asking for a single dollar. I'm not asking for you to be in the streets protesting. I'm not asking you to do anything else, but read one single book. Take the same amount of energy that you use in arguing, put that into a positive activity like reading. It's very simple. Read a book. Because so often we see the Dunning-Kruger effect where people are not very good at something and yet they claim to be, right? That's something that we've seen more prevalent in our society. King Hadi just asked me what book. There are many books. You can read the autobiography of Malcolm X. You can read books on Martin Luther King. You can watch 13 on Netflix.
I just posted that. The documentary 13.
Exactly. Very simple thing. It's a very entertaining, educational, and informative video. It's something to watch, and it'll give you a perspective. I'm not saying we need to solve racism. We can't solve human character. But what we can do is be aware of it. Born a Crime is also, somebody suggesting Born a Crime. They say that's a great book as well. We only have 2 more minutes, Tehran, so you might want to, if you want to wrap it up. When we have 2 minutes, I want to say something because Salam Tehran, Iman Jun, thank you everybody. I want to say this to all the Persian people listening. When I was a kid, there was this Hafez poem that always sat very well with me. Hafez said, Yari andar kas nemi binam o yaran ro che shod. Dusti ke akhar omad, dustaran ro che shod. That is what we're looking for allies, for friends, for empathy. And this isn't just for injustice here. This is for injustice everywhere. See, the problem is, in the world, تعداد آدم زیاده، متاسفانه انسانه که کمه. There are a lot of people, but not a lot of humanity. Please, انسانیتتون رو فراموش نکنید. Do not forget your humanity.
Tehran Jan, thank you so much for taking time to be on this live. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kusha, for having this live.
Thank you. Thank you so much. واقعا ممنون. لطف کردی. عالی بود.
Bye, guys.